Hi everybody, welcome to the Mitchell Brewery. It's a lovely sunny day in Nottingham and it's the start of the 2015-16 brewing season. I'm going to be making a recipe today from Clone Brews. I'm going to be making something called Brooklyn Summer Ale. The boiler's been on, it's boiled up to 100. I'm just waiting for it to cool down so I can put some water into my mash tun for the mashing process and let the fun begin. Happy brewing! Here we go, first step, I'm going to decant 9 litres of boiled and cooled water from the boiler into the mash tun. Here we go folks, this is the Maris Otter Pale Ale malt and you can see, look at that, lovely goodness. What I'm doing, I've just put a couple of kilos in here, I'm just halfway through adding the first stage of the malt to the mash tun. Next up I've got some torrefied wheat and I've got some crystal malt and I'm going to add 113 grams of this and 170 grams of the crystal. You can see the malt has been added to the 9 litres of water in the mash tun. What I do now is give it a good old stir so that the water is in contact with the grain, and you want this water to be in contact with all the grain surfaces because the idea is that the water is meant to be dissolving the sugars from the malt, and it's the sugar that turns to alcohol. So the more water in contact with sugar, the more sugary solution we get at the end, the better. So I need to do this quickly so as not to lose any heat from here. Then what I'll do then is wrap up the mash tun for an hour and a half and then we'll drain it through. Okay, all the mash is ready and I've got this special little cover that I made which will basically just fit over the top of this, like that. And that basically gives a little bit of insulation. So I do find that I lose a little bit of heat at the top of the mash tun. So if I do that, now I'll leave that for an hour and a half and come back to it, and all the sugar should have been dissolved, or most of the sugar should have been dissolved away from the malt. Okay, just because you've got an hour and a half to wait, it's no time to sit back and relax. We've still got plenty to do. Next up, we've got to fill up the boiler and get that back on again, because when this mash tun is ready, we need a boiler full of boiled and cooled water ready to sparge through the mash tun. What that means is the water will basically rinse through the mash and dissolve all the sugar. So here we go, let's get this thing on again. Get it boiling. See what temperature we're at the moment. So we are somewhere in the region of about 60 degrees. So we need to get this back up to temperature again, and this thing can take a while, so we mustn't mess about. There we go, got a little bit more water. I'm going to fill this back up to about within an inch of the top. Okay, my boiler's on and boiling, and that's going to take a little while. Next up, I've got to sterilise my primary fermentation bin. And what I'm going to do, I've already put a couple of tablets in there and they've dissolved away. This is the stuff I use, Milton's sterilising tablets. And as I say, if it's good enough for babies, it's good enough for beer. Here we go, I put a couple of those Milton sterilising tablets in here with a little bit of water. And I've boiled a kettle and I'm going to add that, and that should basically help sterilise the stuff through its magic. What I'll do now is I'll top it right up to the top. And I'll put the lid on as well, and you can see I've got a scouring pad there because I've give this a proper clean before I get to. So cleaning is 90% of brewing, I'm afraid. So you need to make sure that your stuff is scrupulously clean. You feel a little bit like Walter White at some point, but it's well worth it. Not that we're doing crystal meth, we're making beer, remember. So here we go, this is the yeast hydration. I'm using Nottingham Dunstar yeast. And what I've boiled some water and I've put 110 mils of water, and I'm just going to allow it to cool to less than 30 degrees C. When it's cool, I shall add the yeast, let it hydrate, and I'll be ready to pitch into the wort later when it's complete. The mash tun has been sitting here for an hour and a half, just the time to take off the insulating cover. And let's just have a quick peek inside the mash tun, see what it looks like. There we go. At this stage you get a really strong malty Ovaltine smell coming out of here. What we need to do now is to drain the liquid from here into the spare fermentation bucket down here. So I'm just going to literally just turn on the tap. There we go. See what we've got here is a really rich solution, sugar solution from the malt. You can see it's taken on the colour of the malt, and that basically is one of the factors for making beer brown, the colour from the malt. So I'll let that drain out. Okay, that's enough. Let's just turn off the tap to the mash tun. Now, what I normally do now is tip this back through the malt, and the reason I do that is because in here there'll be quite a lot of fines from the malt, and if I tip it back through the bed of malt, it acts like a filter bed, so it will capture those little particles of fines which will be then retained in the spent malt, and hopefully that should help clarify it, keep out fines from the beer. Now, just to show how sugary this stuff is, we can just have a little taste of it. There we go. There we go. You can see that is pretty much just pure sugary solution. Here we go. Cheers. Oh, it's very sweet. Okay, that's drained through. Now I've got a boiler full of boiled water which is cooled to less than 70 degrees, and I'm going to sparge that, so I'm going to basically spray this through the grain and that will then drain into here. So if I just turn on the sparger, you can see what I've got here. This is the rose from a fine rose from a watering can. I basically just run all of this water through the mash, and that will basically dissolve the rest of the sugar from the malt and into my bucket here. So this will take a little while. Okay, all the water's from the boiler through the malt into my containers here. I've got 4 litres in this one, so this is the first one, so that's much more concentrated. I swap buckets and I've got another couple of gallons, sorry, so that's 4 gallons here, 2 gallons here. In this one's weaker because it's the secondary bit. So there's still water in here, and if needs be I'll tap off some more, because you do lose a lot of liquid during the hot boil. So what we have here is the sweet wort. This will go into the boiler with the hops, so I'm going to put it in here first, get it boiling, and then I'll add the hops. Sweet wort is back in the boiler and that's set. Now at this point I'm just going to point out the fact that I've got a fan going. It has been for a little while, because this is the start of the hop boil, and this will be boiling for an hour and a half with the hops, and then tends to get very, very humid, and if you're not careful you get lots of condensation. So I'll set this fan up just to sort of blow it out the door. Bye! Okay, the water is less than 25 degrees. I'm just going to tip the yeast into there. I'll just let it sit there and give it a stir in a bit. Now the sweet wort is ready for the hop addition. Look at that, nice rolling boil there. There we go, this is pearl, ready to be added at the beginning of the hop boil. Oh, immediately can smell that really quite phenolic hop smell, very nice. Oily smell of the hops. Try not to spill it too much. Here we go, the yeast has been sitting in the water. I gave it a little stir a while ago, and this is a nicely hydrated yeast, and we're going to pitch that into the beer later when it's ready. Look at that, fantastic. Here we go, 15 minutes from the end of the hop boil, and I've just added in the second addition of hops. And what I've got to do next is add this thing. This is my copper cooler, and basically this will get connected up to the cold water tap, but I need to pop it in to the boiler because it needs to be sterilised. So the last 10 minutes of boiling should sterilise that nicely, and I can turn it on. There we go, that's the last of the hops added, and you can smell a glorious smell here of the hops added. I've also added the copper coiler, the copper cooler even, the copper coil, and that's attached to the outside tap, and in a few minutes the boiler will go off and it'll be ready to cool the beer. And that's the hot boil finished. Just turn off the boiler and let's go and turn on the cooler. Make sure that's a little bit of trepidation when I turn on the cooler, just in case this thing spurts water everywhere. But you can feel the cold water going in at the bottom of the coil that goes round, and then you can feel it really hot coming out of this nice return here. So that's working really efficiently, and this will take about 10 minutes to cool down. It's a miraculous, otherwise it would take hours and hours to cool this down. Right, the beer, the bitter wort now is under 30 degrees C, and I'm just running it off into the primary fermentation bin. Not bad. We've got just over 5 gallons, and that's what we've got left. There's the residue of the hops in the boiler, so we need to take this inside and add the yeast. Okay, here we go. This is where the primary fermentation bin will live for the next week. Until next weekend, I'm just going to pitch the yeast. So all we do is take it and give it a swirl around, and then just dump it in. There we go, just add it in like that. That's plenty. And that will do the trick. That will convert the sugar in the bitter wort to alcohol, and then the first stage of fermentation will be done. The next stage is to then add it to the pressure barrel with some primary sugar. Hi everyone, it's 6 days after the primary fermentation stage started, and the fermentation bin is ready. The contents have finished the primary fermentation stage. This is now going to be siphoned into the pressure barrel. Now, I've already added some all clear finings into here. I've got 71 grams of priming sugar ready. I've got my siphon nicely sterilising. Remember, cleanliness is next to beerliness, is that right? And I've got 30 bottles ready to be filled up. So I'm basically going to fill up the pressure barrel, then I'm going to transfer from here into the bottles, because basically I can't manage to drink an entire barrel of beer in the requisite time. Here we go, that's 30 bottles of beer filled up, and I've still got a decent amount left in the pressure barrel, so I'm looking forward to that in a few weeks' time. And what I do now, the next thing I do is I'll take the labels off and relabel them, and I'll put them in this dark cupboardy space down here. I've still got a few bottles left. I've got about 20 bottles left from the last time. Cheers everyone, happy brewing, see you next time.